The Understanding Islam Through Virtual Worlds project, I co-directed that with Joshua S. Fouts. We are both senior fellows at the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs, and we're the principals at Dancing Inc. Productions. We interviewed scores of people across 4 continents in the physical world and the virtual world of Second Life, where people have built mosques and communities. There's an experimental Islamic community called Al-Andalus. There's a virtual Hajj to Mecca that was built by islamonline.net. There are countless groups that meet, women's groups, cultural groups, people who want to study the global culture and economy and the role of Islam in a changing world. And one of the things that we learned is that this is the ideal medium for conducting difficult conversations about sensitive cultural subjects, because there are no physical bodies present, and that does not mean to say that every sensitive conversation has the potential to escalate into violence. Far from it. But the reality is that in the physical world, there's all sorts of intimidation that comes from being candid and being vulnerable, and these conversations are difficult and complex and require a level of vulnerability for progress. We have 3 deliverables for this project: Mishima, that we created with Ill Clan Animation, a graphic novel that is available at Cost Online, and a policy recommendation report for the Obama administration called Digital Diplomacy, about using the medium for progress in a new global culture and economy in the imagination age, and particularly as it relates to relations between the West and the Muslim world. This is a particularly interesting time to study Islam. Obviously, the vast majority of people who practice Islam around the world are, like everyone, just looking to live their lives. But many countries in which Islam is practiced forbids people from expressing themselves freely, and the internet, in that case, provides a venue for creative communication that allows people to express themselves in ways they simply find themselves unable to do in the physical world, which makes it particularly interesting. On top of that, we were really able to come to understand how kaleidoscopic Islam is around the world. For example, there are many people that we interviewed in Second Life who live in the United States and Canada and Europe who self-identify as Muslim, who expressed a completely different experience than people that we interviewed across the Middle East, for example. And even within the Middle East, practicing Islam is a very kaleidoscopic experience depending on the culture in which it's practiced, and it's connected to many religious and often inseparable political views, and yet at the same time we have a rapidly transforming global geopolitical, cultural, and economic landscape, and a virtual world is really the perfect medium in which to study these overlapping interests and how real people are affected and how they are learning to creatively work within and around systems to reach out beyond often painfully slow bureaucratic change and political and religious change, because the times are changing and people are able now to bridge that gap on their own through virtual worlds like Second Life. The systems still governing human behavior today were created far in advance of our collective ability to assess those systems for their relevance in an overlapping world. In other words, the entire concept of values is changing, and we are becoming increasingly aware, for example, of climate change, something that affects everyone regardless of one's own belief systems. And so I think one of the most painful aspects of the global transformation that we're currently undergoing is the fact that we are all, to varying degrees, faced with the awareness that personal and community value systems, national value systems, are competing against global interests. And this is really this is a very painful aspect of the evolution of human consciousness, because how do you rate value systems against the endurance and the progress of a changing global system? And so I think that the internet makes us more aware of the fact that it enables us to understand complex systems, complex information in a visual way that condenses the learning curve, condenses language barriers, condenses socioeconomic barriers, and really helps us break down some of our preconceived notions about what it means to defend values. The fact of the matter is that the defense of values can be a very deadly proposition. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it wrong to defend values. I don't know where we would be as human beings if we didn't find a way to find something worth defending. It seems like the alternative would be far more bleak. So then it seems, if you counterbalance those two ideas, that the real necessity that we face is how do we fairly and equitably find a way to preserve the value and the dignity of what it means to be a human being. The disparity between the wealthiest individuals and the poorest individuals is really a hindrance and a failure of all of us in some ways. And so, now with the economic collapse globally and in the United States particularly, I'm paying attention to big journalism and the media, and everyone is acting so stunned that they didn't see this coming. But the fact of the matter is, I as you know, spent 6 months investigating post-Katrina corporate profiteering in the Gulf Coast and seeing the billions of taxpayer dollars that were being wasted. Now, if you take that as an example, information was out there, but in order for people to really understand that information, they had to invest a lot of time and a lot of resources to really decipher all of that. I think that virtual worlds present an opportunity for people like yourself to give presentations that employ mixed media and condense the learning curve while bringing people into a complicated and nuanced situation in a way that allows them to actively participate instead of just passively observing or absorbing information that then they feel helpless to turn into action.